Welcome to the Graphical Analysis section of Learning Module 1, which is at the end of Chapter 1 in your textbook and begins on page 13. Let's take a look at the objectives for this section, or what my expectations are for you. To understand some data relationships, how to calculate slope, physical properties of a graph, and types of curves, or curve types. Two variables can be related in different ways, essentially three different ways. One's a direct relationship. An example of a direct relationship like they use in your textbook is yields and fertilizer. Sometimes we work that in class where as you increase the levels of fertilizer applied to, say, a hay crop, yield increase. There's a direct relationship. It's a positive relationship. An inverse relationship, or when one goes up, the other goes down. With the direct, application rate of fertilizer went up, hay yield went up. Example from our textbook is gasoline prices and gasoline consumption. Generally, as the price of gasoline rises, the amount used or the consumption decreases. So those have an inverse relationship. And the third one's a mixed relationship. A good example of this is rainfall and crop production. If we're very dry, our crops are not producing, growing like they should. As we get some rainfall, they begin to grow better. So this is a direct relationship. Increased rainfall, increased crop growth. But if we get too much rain and we get flooding and areas washing out, then we get decreased crop production. So at that point, it takes a turn the other way in a negative or an inverse type relationship. Physical properties of the graph. There's basically two axes. I think we know this, a vertical and a horizontal axis. And we refer to these with a letter. Our vertical or our upright axis is normally referred to as the y-axis. I left this blank, so in your notes, if you're following along, you can write it in the y-axis. And then the horizontal axis, normally referred to as the x-axis. Curve types. We basically have two types of curves. These aren't curves, at least the linear curve is not a curve, but in fact a straight line. The nonlinear curve does have some curvatures in it. Slope. We're going to look a little bit more later in a couple of slides down the road here and identify those four types of curves, but let's talk about slope. Linear curves are straight line slopes. The slope of a linear curve is constant. The slope refers to the ratio and change between the axis, and you've probably heard the term rise over run. And a nonlinear curve may possess more than one measurable slope. Now, one thing I don't have in this PowerPoint is an image of a nonlinear curve, but you can go over to page 16 in your textbook. At the bottom of the page, figure 1.5 is demonstrating a little bit about calculating slope, because there will be more than one measurable slope in a nonlinear curve. Slope is rise over run, as we just mentioned. This is the ratio of change in the y-axis, or the vertical axis, to the change in the x-axis, or the horizontal axis. Thus, the rise up the vertical, the run across the horizontal, rise over run. And there's an example in your textbook there at the bottom of page 14, giving you change in price divided in change in quantity, and they're using gloves as an example. You need to review that, look it over, probably be sending you some practice problems via email. A positive sloped linear curve is also called a ray. Four types of linear curves: positive and negative. Those are the two that we'll work with first in the first couple of chapters in the textbook as we progress this semester. And then we have a zero curve and an infinite curve. And we'll talk more about those when we get to Chapter 5 and we're discussing elasticities. Let's take a look at some of these linear curves. This is a positive slope, also known as a ray, moving upward, with a negative slope, the zero slope, and the infinite slope. And those zero and infinite slopes, again, more about those when we talk about elasticities. But for these first 4 chapters, we'll be primarily dealing with positive slopes and negative slopes. Okay, in summary, variables can be related in 3 different ways: direct, inverse, mixed. There are 2 types of curves: linear and nonlinear. Slope refers to the ratio of the change between the axis, or the rise over run. And the slope of a linear curve is constant. Now, the slope of a linear curve is constant. A nonlinear curve may have more than one measurable slope. And there are 4 types of linear curves: positive, negative, zero, and infinite. Don't forget in the learning module to watch the video on how to calculate slope. That'll give you some help with the assignment that I'll be sending out through email.